You begin by noticing your breath, the way it arrives without effort and leaves without being asked to stay. It moves in a gentle rhythm, like a tide that has been practicing this motion for a very long time. As your breathing slows, your body begins to soften, not because you tell it to, but because it recognizes the familiar invitation of rest. Muscles loosen, thoughts stretch and quiet. In this calm, something subtle becomes easier to sense. Beneath the surface of your awareness, beneath skin and bone and the steady pulse of blood, your body is busy with a quieter kind of conversation. It does not use sound. It does not need words. Yet it is constant, precise, and deeply patient. Every cell carries instructions, folded neatly inside it. Instructions so small they escape ordinary attention, yet so powerful they shape everything you are. You are not asked to understand these instructions all at once. Instead, you are invited to feel their presence, like the low hum of electricity in a sleeping house. This hum has been with you since before your first breath. It was there when you were still forming, when cells divided and learned their roles, when shape and structure slowly emerged. It has never stopped speaking, even when you were too busy to listen. This language your body uses is astonishingly simple. It is written with only 4 letters. Not letters you read with your eyes, but chemical shapes that fit together like familiar companions. Over and over again, these 4 letters repeat in long, careful sequences. They do not rush. They do not improvise. They follow patterns refined over unimaginable stretches of time. You can think of them as notes in a melody that never quite ends. Alone, each note is plain. Together, they create variation, harmony, and depth. These 4 notes have composed forests and oceans, wings and hands, eyes that see light and minds that wonder about it. They have written you, line by line, without ever needing to know your name. As you rest, it becomes easier to imagine how this code works without force. Nothing is shouted into place. No part of you is assembled with urgency. Instructions are read slowly, interpreted gently, and carried out by tiny molecular machines that drift and bind and release with quiet accuracy. Life at its smallest scale is calm. You may have been taught to imagine biology as rigid or mechanical, but here, in this softened awareness, it feels more like a whisper passed from one moment to the next. Each cell listens. Each cell responds. When something needs repair, the message is delivered. When growth is needed, the letters are read again, patiently, like returning to a familiar line in a well-loved book. This code does not care about your worries or your plans. It does not judge your past or anticipate your future. It exists entirely in the present, responding only to what is needed now. Perhaps that is why it feels so steady. While your thoughts may wander, the code remains focused, attentive, and calm. You begin to sense that rest itself is part of this conversation. When you slow down, your body shifts its priorities. Energy moves from action to maintenance, from reaction to repair. Instructions that were waiting now find their moment. Cells mend small breaks. Proteins fold themselves carefully. Balance is restored in countless tiny ways you will never consciously notice. There is comfort in knowing that so much care happens without your involvement. You do not have to instruct your heart to beat or your lungs to breathe. You do not have to remind your cells how to be themselves. The code remembers. It always remembers. This memory is not like yours. It does not recall images or emotions. It remembers patterns. It remembers what has worked before. It remembers how life has survived heat and cold, hunger and abundance. And it passes this memory forward, quietly, faithfully, from one cell to the next. As you drift deeper into this idea, the boundary between you and the process softens. You are not separate from the code. You are its expression, its current arrangement. For this brief moment in time, the letters have come together in this particular way, forming your hands, your voice, your capacity to feel calm right now. Nothing about this is hurried. The code has time. It has always had time. Long before there were clocks or calendars, it learned patience. It learned that complexity emerges best when allowed to unfold slowly, without pressure. That lesson remains written into you. Your body seems to know this as you lie here. It responds to stillness by deepening it. Each breath feels slightly longer, slightly softer than the last. The whispering inside you grows more noticeable, not louder, but clearer, like hearing a distant stream once the wind settles. You do not need to follow every detail of how this language works. Tonight, it is enough to know that it exists steady and reliable. It is enough to trust that while you rest, something ancient and careful continues its work, guided by 4 simple letters arranged with quiet wisdom. As this chapter closes, you may find yourself curious, not in an urgent way, but in a gentle one. If all of this complexity begins with just 4 letters, you might begin to wonder what those letters look like up close, and how they carry so much memory in such a small space. And as that curiosity drifts with you into sleep, your body continues to whisper, inviting you to listen more closely to the alphabet hidden within every single cell. You imagine yourself becoming smaller, not suddenly, but gradually, as if the world is expanding around you rather than you shrinking within it. The room fades, the sound of your breath becomes distant. You drift inward, past the familiar landscape of your body, moving gently through layers that once felt solid but now feel welcoming and open. You pass the skin, a quiet frontier of protection and sensation. Beneath it, blood flows like a slow river, carrying oxygen and nutrients without needing direction. You slip between cells, each one alive, each one busy, yet unhurried. At last, you arrive inside a single cell, a space far smaller than imagination usually allows, yet vast in its quiet activity. The cell does not feel crowded. It feels organized, calm, almost spacious. Structures float rather than press. Nothing collides by accident. Everything moves as if guided by familiarity. Near the center, protected and carefully folded, rests something precious. This is where the alphabet of life is kept. You are not met with letters the way you know them. There are no sharp edges or printed lines. Instead, the 4 letters appear as molecular shapes, each with its own presence and tendency. They do not exist alone. They are always reaching, pairing, aligning, separating, and returning again. Adenine finds thymine the way hands find each other in the dark. Cytosine pairs with guanine just as naturally. These pairings are not choices. They are attractions, guided by shape and charge, by the quiet rules of chemistry that feel less like laws and more like preferences refined over time. Together, these paired letters form rungs on a twisting ladder, a structure so elegant it feels almost inevitable. The ladder curves into a spiral, not tightly wound, not loose, but balanced. This shape is called a double helix, though here it feels less like a name and more like a gesture, a slow turn repeated endlessly. You notice how small it all is. Each letter is unimaginably tiny, yet their arrangement stretches long, far longer than the cell itself. To fit, the ladder coils and folds, wrapping gently around supportive proteins, like thread wound carefully around spools. Nothing is tangled. Nothing is wasted. This alphabet does not store information the way a book does. There are no sentences or punctuation marks. Instead, meaning comes from order, from sequence, from the way one letter follows another, again and again, building patterns that cells have learned to read. You sense how this reading happens without awareness. The cell does not think about what it is doing. It simply responds. When a particular sequence is needed, the ladder opens just enough, and a copy is made. The original remains protected, calm, unchanged. The copy travels outward, carrying instructions written in the same 4 letters. It feels important that this copying is careful but not fragile. The bonds between letters are strong enough to hold, yet gentle enough to release when needed. This balance allows life to be stable without becoming rigid. Change is possible, but chaos is kept at bay. As you observe, the 4 letters begin to feel familiar, almost friendly. They are not abstract. They are dependable. Each one knows its role not because it was assigned, but because it fits. Shape meets shape. Charge meets charge. Harmony emerges from compatibility. You realize that these same letters appear in every living thing you have ever seen. The difference between a leaf and a lung is not the alphabet itself, but the way the letters are arranged. A fern and a fox, a bird and a human, all read from the same set of symbols, written in different orders at different lengths. This simplicity is not limiting. It is freeing. With just 4 letters, life explores endless forms. It repeats what works, adjusts what doesn't, and preserves what survives. Over time, complexity grows not through new ingredients, but through new combinations. You feel a quiet awe at this efficiency. No excess, no ornamentation, just enough structure to allow creativity to unfold naturally. The alphabet does not need decoration. Its beauty lies in its restraint. The cell around you continues its gentle motion. Proteins drift past, folded precisely according to instructions that began here, in these letters. Energy is exchanged. Materials are recycled. Nothing rests completely, yet nothing feels hurried. You begin to understand that memory lives here, not as recollection, but as continuity. The alphabet remembers how to make a cell a cell. It remembers how to respond to warmth and cold, to scarcity and abundance. This memory is passed forward every time a cell divides, every time the ladder is copied. And still, the letters remain the same. They do not age. They do not tire. They persist, unchanged in their basic form, even as everything built from them grows, adapts, and eventually fades. As you prepare to drift back outward, away from the cell, one thought stays with you. If these 4 letters can hold instructions for an entire body, perhaps the real mystery is not their power, but how they are read so gently, so patiently, transforming quiet sequences into living, breathing presence. And as you rest with that thought, you begin to wonder how these silent letters are translated, step by careful step, into the experience of being you. You remain close to the code now, close enough to sense movement without noise. The letters themselves stay quiet, but around them, activity begins. Something is being read. Not by eyes, not by thought, but by presence. The cell opens a small section of the long spiral, just enough to reveal a sequence that has waited patiently for this moment. You notice how careful this opening is. The ladder does not unravel. It does not expose more than necessary. Only a short stretch is revealed, like a single line lifted gently from a page. The rest remains protected, resting in its folded calm. This restraint feels important, as though life understands the value of privacy even at its smallest scale. A copy is made, but not in haste. One strand of letters serves as a guide, while new letters drift in, pairing themselves naturally, each one finding its familiar partner. This copied message does not stay in the center of the cell. It travels outward, like a note carried from a quiet room into a workshop. Here, the instructions are translated. Not all at once, not with force. The message is read in groups, small sets of letters at a time. Each group corresponds to a particular building block, an amino acid, which you can imagine as a bead waiting to be threaded. These beads begin to line up, guided by the sequence of letters. One by one, they connect, forming a chain that slowly folds into a shape. This shape is not random. It curves and bends until it becomes a protein, a working piece of the cell. Some proteins become structure, giving form and strength. Others become messengers, carrying signals from one place to another. Some act as caretakers, speeding up reactions, repairing damage, or guiding motion. You sense how intimate this process is. The instructions do not describe what the final result should look like. They simply specify the order of beads, trusting physics and chemistry to handle the rest. Shape emerges naturally. Function follows form. Nothing is micromanaged. This translation happens constantly everywhere all the time. Even now, as you rest, your cells are reading, building, folding, and adjusting. Your body is not a finished object. It is an ongoing interpretation, a continuous performance of the same quiet script. You begin to feel how this makes change possible. When your body heals, it is not inventing something new. It is returning to instructions that have always been there. When you grow stronger, adapt, or learn, the code participates, responding to signals, adjusting what is read and when. There is a gentleness to this adaptability. The code does not panic when conditions change. It does not rush to rewrite itself. Instead, it alters how often certain instructions are read, how long they remain active, how strongly their effects are felt. Presence is adjusted without erasing identity. You may notice how this mirrors your own experience. You are not the same in every moment, yet you remain yourself. Mood shifts. Energy rises and falls. Attention narrows and expands. Beneath it all, something steady persists, allowing variation without collapse. The cell understands timing. Some instructions are read quickly and often. Others are kept silent for long stretches, waiting for the right signal. Development follows a schedule written not in dates, but in readiness. This is how cells know when to divide, when to specialize, when to rest. As you follow this process, it becomes clear that becoming you was not a single event. It was a gradual unfolding. Early on, instructions guided cells to become different from one another. Some learned to contract and release, becoming muscle. Others flattened and layered, becoming skin. Some extended delicate branches, becoming nerve cells capable of carrying thought and sensation. Once these roles were established, they were maintained through constant reading and rereading. Identity was reinforced through repetition, not rigidity. Each cell remembers what it is by continuing to do it. And still, nothing is permanent. Cells wear out. Proteins break down. Components are recycled. Yet replacement follows effortlessly, guided by the same instructions, restored without ceremony. You begin to sense how life avoids drama. There is no announcement when a cell replaces a protein or repairs a strand. The work happens quietly, continuously, invisibly. Perhaps that is why it feels so reliable. This process does not aim for perfection. It aims for sufficiency. Instructions are clear enough to guide, flexible enough to tolerate variation. Small differences emerge, sometimes altering function slightly, sometimes not at all. Most changes pass unnoticed, absorbed into the larger pattern. You may feel a subtle comfort in knowing that you are not held together by precision alone, but by forgiveness built into the system. Errors are expected. Repair mechanisms exist. Redundancy provides safety. Life persists not by avoiding mistakes, but by accommodating them. As you rest, the idea settles that reading becomes being through patience, through repetition, through trust in simple rules applied gently over time. You are not the result of a single reading, but of countless readings layered one upon another. And as this chapter draws to a close, one quiet question remains with you. If instructions can become form, and form can become experience, then what happens when the instructions are copied again, passed forward, carrying both stability and possibility into the future? You remain with the code as it prepares to do something it has done countless times before. A moment arrives when a cell senses it is time to become two. There is no announcement, no sudden urgency. The decision unfolds gradually, like a tide turning far from shore. Inside the cell, attention shifts toward the long, spiraled ladder of letters. Before division can happen, the instructions must be copied. Not roughly, not quickly. Every letter must be accounted for, every pairing confirmed. The ladder begins to gently unzip along its length, the paired letters separating without resistance. They have done this before. They know they will meet again. As the strands part, each becomes a guide. New letters drift nearby, free and waiting, drawn by shape and attraction. Adenine finds thymine. Cytosine finds guanine. One by one, the familiar bonds form again. Two ladders emerge where there was once one, each carrying the same long sequence, each ready to continue the work of living. This copying is astonishingly reliable. Most of the time, it proceeds without flaw. The letters align correctly. The structure reforms. Continuity is preserved. Life depends on this faithfulness, and the process delivers it quietly again and again. Yet perfection is not the goal. Even in this careful system, slips occur. A letter is occasionally misplaced. A bond forms where it usually does not. A tiny alteration enters the sequence, unnoticed by the cell, unremarkable in the moment. These changes are called mutations, but here they feel less dramatic than the name suggests. They are not sudden disasters. They are small deviations, subtle variations in a long text. Many do nothing at all. Some are corrected almost immediately, repaired by vigilant molecular caretakers that patrol the code, scanning for mismatches. Others remain. They pass forward into the next cell and the next. Most fade into silence, never affecting function, never shaping form. But some rarely change how instructions are read. They alter a protein slightly. They shift timing. They adjust sensitivity. In these moments, something new enters the story. Not chaos, but possibility. You sense how delicate this balance is. Too many changes would disrupt coherence. Too few would freeze life in place. The system allows just enough variation to explore, just enough stability to endure. It is a compromise refined through deep time. As you observe, it becomes clear that resilience is not the absence of fragility. It is built from it. The same openness that allows copying also allows change. The same bonds that hold letters together can be released and reformed. Flexibility and vulnerability are woven into the same structure. This feels familiar in a quiet way. You may recognize how growth in your own life often follows small shifts rather than sudden revolutions. A habit changes. A perspective softens. A response alters slightly. Over time, these tiny adjustments reshape experience. The code operates with similar patience. It does not seek improvement. It does not aim toward progress. It simply continues, allowing variation to exist and trusting the environment to decide what persists. Changes that help survival tend to remain. Those that hinder tend to fade. This is how evolution works, though here it feels less like competition and more like conversation. The code proposes variations. The world responds. Over generations, patterns emerge, shaped by light and temperature, by scarcity and abundance. You realize that every living thing is the result of countless copying events, layered one upon another. Your body carries not only faithful repetitions, but also ancient changes that proved workable enough to last. Traits that once offered an advantage remain written into you, even if their original context has long disappeared. There is humility in this understanding. You are not designed. You are arrived at. You are the current expression of a process that has no foresight, only persistence. And yet, from this blind continuation, awareness emerges. Curiosity emerges. Calm emerges here and now. The code does not mind mistakes. It expects them. That expectation is built into its repair systems, its redundancies, its tolerance. Life does not collapse at the first deviation. It absorbs difference and keeps going. As you rest, you may feel how comforting this is. You do not need to be flawless to continue. Stability does not require rigidity. Adaptation does not demand destruction. Small changes can coexist with enduring identity. The cell completes its division. Two cells now carry the same long text, nearly identical, quietly ready to continue reading. The original cell is gone, but nothing is lost. Continuity persists through transformation. You begin to sense that inheritance is not just about preserving what was, but about allowing what might be. Each copy carries both memory and openness. The future is never written from scratch, but it is never entirely predetermined either. As this chapter settles, one gentle idea lingers. If tiny changes can shape entire species over time, perhaps the quiet differences carried within you connect not only to your present body, but to a long, unfolding history written in molecules. And as that thought drifts softly through you, the code continues its careful copying, carrying time itself forward, one patient letter at a time. You allow your attention to loosen its grip on the present moment, and without effort you begin to drift backward. Not through memories, not through stories told aloud, but through something quieter and deeper. This journey does not belong to your mind. It belongs to your cells. They know the way. Time here does not move in years or centuries. It moves in generations. Each step backward is marked by a division, a copy, a passing on. The same four letters you sensed before remain constant, even as bodies change around them. They travel not as ideas, but as arrangements, folded carefully into living form. You sense how far this path extends. Long before you had a name, Before your family line could be traced with words, these letters were already moving, already being read and copied. They passed through ancestors you will never know, through bodies shaped by climates and landscapes that no longer exist. Ice advanced and retreated. Forests rose and fell. Oceans shifted their boundaries. Through it all, the code persisted. It adjusted quietly, allowing small variations to take hold when they helped survival, letting others fade when they did not. There was no record kept in ink or stone, yet history was preserved all the same. DNA becomes a historian without intention. It does not decide what matters. It does not highlight victories or mourn losses. It simply carries forward what remains. What works stays. What cannot adapt disappears. Over time, this quiet filtering writes a story longer than any civilization. You begin to sense how much of that story lives inside you now. Your cells carry instructions refined through countless challenges. Responses to cold, to hunger, to injury. Tendencies shaped by environments your body may never encounter again. The past breathes through you, not as memory, but as readiness. This inheritance is subtle. You do not feel ancient winters or early migrations directly, yet traces remain. How your body stores energy, how it reacts to stress, how it repairs itself after harm. These patterns are not chosen. They are received. You may notice a shift in how you think about age. Your body feels young or old according to calendars and mirrors, but at the molecular level it is unimaginably ancient. The code within you has survived far longer than any individual lifespan. It has passed through extinction events and narrow escapes, carried by creatures that never knew they were part of something enduring. This realization does not feel heavy. It feels grounding. You are not isolated in time. You are connected backward through an unbroken chain of living matter, each link fragile on its own, yet together astonishingly persistent. You sense how this continuity changes the meaning of change itself. Nothing emerges from nothing. Every new form arises from what came before, shaped by circumstance but guided by inheritance. Even innovation depends on memory. As you drift further, you notice that the code does not store the past in detail. It does not preserve exact forms or specific moments. It keeps only what is needed to continue. The rest is released. Forgetting here is not loss. It is efficiency. This selective memory allows life to remain light enough to adapt. Carrying everything would be too heavy. So the code learns what to keep and what to let go, again and again across generations. What remains is not a complete archive, but a distilled essence of survival. You may feel a quiet parallel within yourself. Your mind also forgets most of what you experience. Only fragments remain, shaped by relevance rather than completeness. Memory, whether cellular or conscious, is always an act of selection. The journey through time begins to slow. You sense how the past gathers itself into the present moment, into you. All of those prior arrangements have converged here, in this particular body, in this particular breath. The path does not end. Continues forward even now. Your cells are already preparing for the future, copying instructions, maintaining integrity, allowing variation. They do this without knowing what tomorrow holds. They trust the same process that has worked before. There is comfort in this trust. Life does not need foresight to persist. It relies on continuity, on patience, on the willingness to adjust without panic. The code does not rush to control the future. It simply keeps going. As you rest with this understanding, the present moment feels fuller. Your breath feels layered with time. Each inhale carries not just oxygen, but history. Each exhale releases tension accumulated across moments far shorter than the span your cells remember. You begin to feel gratitude without a clear object. Gratitude for endurance, for survival, for the quiet success of a system that never sought recognition. The code has never paused to admire itself. It has simply continued. This chapter begins to soften, its edges blurring into calm. One last thought drifts forward with you. If so much of the past lives silently within you, shaping responses and possibilities, then perhaps the next question is not where you came from, but how this shared history connects you to every other living thing that carries the same ancient letters. And as that question settles gently in your mind, The journey through time opens into a wider landscape, where many paths meet, all written in the same quiet language. You let your awareness widen now, expanding gently beyond the boundaries of your own body. The quiet code you have been following does not belong to you alone. It is not personal in the way a name or memory is personal. It is shared. As your attention drifts outward, you begin to sense how far this language extends. You imagine a tree standing somewhere in the dark, its leaves resting, its roots drinking slowly from the soil. Inside each of its cells, the same 4 letters are being read. Not in the same order as yours, not producing the same shapes, but written in the same alphabet. The tree does not know you exist, yet at the molecular level, you and it are fluent in the same language. You imagine a bird settling into sleep, its feathers lifting slightly with each breath. Within its muscles, its eyes, its hollow bones, the same chemical letters pair and unpair, guiding growth and repair. The bird's body is built for flight, yours is not, yet the instructions come from the same set of symbols. This realization softens the sense of distance between forms. Differences remain visible and meaningful, but they feel less absolute. Life becomes a collection of interpretations rather than isolated inventions. The alphabet does not change, only the arrangement, the emphasis, the timing. You may sense how deeply this connects living things that seem unrelated. A mushroom pushing through damp earth. A fish gliding through cold water. A human lying quietly, listening to a calm voice. All of them are reading, copying, and responding to the same 4-letter script. The code does not favor complexity. It does not rank bodies by intelligence or beauty. It simply offers possibilities. Over time, certain arrangements persist because they fit their surroundings. Others fade because they do not. The alphabet remains neutral, indifferent, endlessly available. You feel how this shared language dissolves the idea of hierarchy. Humans are not written in a special ink. We are not given extra letters. Our complexity comes from layers of arrangement, from long histories of variation and selection, not from a different foundation. This does not make you smaller. It places you more gently within a wider living field. You are not standing apart from nature looking in. You are inside it, speaking the same quiet language, participating in the same ongoing conversation. You notice how this perspective changes the meaning of connection. Kinship is no longer limited to family trees or species boundaries. It extends outward to anything that grows, repairs itself, and responds to the world. Connection becomes molecular before it becomes emotional. The code allows life to explore difference without losing coherence. A whale and a mouse share most of their letters, arranged in ways that create vast contrasts in size and shape. Yet beneath those differences, familiar patterns repeat. Bones form similarly. Cells divide in the same basic way. Instructions are read through the same process. You may feel a sense of calm in this repetition. Life does not reinvent itself from nothing each time. It builds patiently on what already exists. Innovation is layered onto stability, not placed in opposition to it. Even organisms without minds, without nerves or awareness, participate fully. A blade of grass responds to light. A bacterium senses nutrients. Their responses are guided by the same principles, written in the same molecular grammar. As you rest, the idea of separation continues to soften. You are distinct, yes, but not disconnected. Your body is a variation on a theme that has been playing for billions of years. The melody changes, but the scale remains. This shared language also explains why life can surprise you. When a medicine developed for one species works in another. When a gene found in a plant has a counterpart in a human cell. Familiarity appears in unexpected places because the alphabet is reused again and again. You may notice how this understanding invites humility. Intelligence did not invent life's language. It emerged from it. Thought is a late arrival in a story that was already complex long before minds appeared to wonder about it. The code does not know it is shared. It does not seek unity. Unity arises naturally because efficiency favors reuse. Why invent a new alphabet when the old one works everywhere? As sleep draws nearer, you feel less like a separate observer and more like a participant. Your breath joins the breathing of forests. Your cellular rhythms echo those in oceans and soil. The differences remain real, but they feel like accents rather than barriers. This perspective does not erase individuality. Instead, it grounds it. You are unique not because you are built from different materials, but because the same materials have come together in a way that has never happened before and will never happen again. Life expresses itself through endless variation without losing its underlying coherence. Diversity becomes a feature, not a fracture. Unity becomes quiet, not enforced. As this chapter settles into stillness, one gentle curiosity remains. If all living things share the same genetic language, then how does this language listen and respond differently to the worlds each organism inhabits? And as that question drifts softly forward, the code continues reading the environment around it, adjusting its voice to the light, the air, and the care it receives. You rest with the idea that the genetic language is shared, and slowly another layer of understanding settles in. The code you carry is not sealed away from the world. It does not sit behind glass, preserved and untouched. Instead, it listens. It remains open to influence, responsive to what surrounds you, attentive in ways that feel almost intimate. You may have imagined genes as fixed instructions, strict and unchanging, issuing orders without regard for circumstance. But here, in this softer light, they feel different. They resemble musicians waiting for cues, ready to play louder or softer depending on the room they are in. The notes are written, yes, but how they are performed depends on context. Inside your cells, the code waits not passively, but receptively. Signals arrive from the world outside your skin and from the inner environment of your body. Light touches your eyes and becomes chemistry. Food enters and becomes energy. Stress releases hormones that drift like messages through your bloodstream. Care, rest, and safety leave their own subtle signatures. These signals do not rewrite the letters themselves. The alphabet remains the same. What changes is which lines are read, how often, and for how long. Some instructions are amplified. Others are softened. Some are held in reserve, waiting for a time that may never come. This process is called gene expression, but the name feels almost too technical for what is happening. Expression here is not performance for an audience. It is response. It is the code answering the world, moment by moment, adjusting its voice to match the conditions it senses. You might imagine the code as a dimmer switch rather than a simple on or off. Instructions glow brighter or fainter depending on the signals they receive. This allows your body to be flexible without losing its core identity. The same letters can support many states of being. You feel how constant this conversation is. Even now, as you lie still, your genes are responding. The temperature of the room, the position of your body, the rhythm of your breath all send information inward. Cells adjust their activity accordingly, conserving energy, repairing damage, maintaining balance. This responsiveness is ancient. Long before minds evolved to interpret danger or comfort, cells were already listening to their surroundings. They learned to sense light and darkness, abundance and scarcity. Those that responded effectively persisted. Those that did not faded from the story. You may sense how this listening blurs the boundary between nature and environment. The code provides potential, but the world helps decide how that potential unfolds. Neither acts alone. Life emerges from their interaction. This understanding carries a quiet reassurance. You are not trapped by your genetic instructions. They do not dictate a single, unchangeable outcome. They offer tendencies, probabilities, ranges of response. Within those ranges, experience matters. Stress, for example, does not simply happen in your mind. It echoes down into your cells, altering which instructions are emphasized. Short-term stress can sharpen focus and mobilize resources. Prolonged stress can shift priorities toward survival at the expense of repair. The code listens and adapts, doing what it believes is necessary. Gentleness, too, leaves its mark. Rest, nourishment, and safety send signals that encourage maintenance and growth. Repair processes are supported. Balance is restored. The code does not understand kindness as an idea, but it recognizes the chemical signatures that accompany it. You begin to feel how deeply embodied your experiences are. Nothing you live through remains entirely abstract. It is translated quietly into molecular responses. Your body keeps score not in judgment but in adjustment. This does not mean that every experience leaves a permanent trace. Many signals are temporary. The code responds and then returns to baseline when conditions change. Flexibility remains central. Still, patterns matter. Repeated signals can shape long-term tendencies, influencing how easily certain instructions are read in the future. This shaping happens without awareness. You do not feel your genes adjusting. There is no sensation to alert you. And yet, the conversation continues, uninterrupted, faithful in its attention. You may notice how this responsiveness makes life feel less mechanical and more relational. The code is not a blueprint followed blindly. It is a dialogue, a feedback loop that allows living systems to stay attuned to their surroundings. This listening extends beyond the individual. In some cases, patterns of response can influence future generations. Certain signals experienced repeatedly can affect how instructions are packaged and passed on, subtly shaping how the next body reads the same letters. The alphabet remains unchanged, but its emphasis shifts. This idea feels delicate, almost fragile. It suggests that experience matters more than once thought, that environments shape biology not just across lifetimes, but within them and sometimes beyond them. You rest with this knowledge without urgency. There is no call to control every signal or optimize every response. The system is resilient. It has always balanced variation and stability. It expects fluctuation. It adapts. What matters, perhaps, is not perfection, but patterns of gentleness. Conditions that support repair rather than constant alarm. Rhythms that allow recovery. Spaces where listening can happen without strain. As sleep deepens, you may feel your body responding already. Heart rate slows. Hormones shift. Instructions related to rest become more prominent. The code recognizes this familiar state and responds as it has countless times before. The world grows quieter, and the conversation softens. Yet it does not stop. It never stops. As this chapter comes to rest, one reflective thought remains with you. If genes are shaped by what they listen to, and if listening is influenced by experience, then perhaps memory itself does not belong only to the mind. And as that idea settles gently, the code continues its quiet attention, carrying whispers forward into a deeper, wordless form of remembering. You remain with the idea of listening genes, and slowly, another realization unfolds. If the code responds to experience, then something must remain afterward. Not a thought, not an image, but a trace. A quiet adjustment that lingers even after the signal fades. This is memory, but not the kind you recall on purpose. Your body remembers without a mind. This remembering does not replay moments or preserve emotions. It does not store scenes or sounds. Instead, it records tendencies, keeps track of what was encountered and how the system responded. It remembers through chemistry, through structure, through subtle shifts in readiness. Inside your cells, experiences leave marks that do not speak, but they influence. Proteins bind a little more easily. Instructions are read a little more often or a little less. Pathways open sooner. Responses arrive faster. Nothing announces that memory is forming, yet it does. You might imagine this kind of memory as a crease in fabric. The cloth is smooth at first. After being folded repeatedly in the same place, it begins to bend there more easily. The material is not damaged. It has learned a preference. Cells learn in this way. Repeated signals shape how genes are packaged, how accessible certain instructions become. The letters themselves remain unchanged, but their surroundings shift. Some sections of the code become easier to open. Others are tucked away, quieter than before. This is not memory with intention. Cells do not decide what to remember. They respond to patterns. When the same signal arrives again and again, the system adjusts, assuming it will likely return. Preparation replaces surprise. You feel how ancient this process is. Long before nervous systems existed, long before awareness arose, living matter was already remembering. A single-celled organism exposed repeatedly to heat or scarcity adjusted its internal chemistry, becoming more resilient. Those adjustments persisted long enough to matter. Over time, this form of memory became layered. In complex organisms like you, it operates alongside conscious memory, beneath it, supporting it silently. Your immune system remembers past encounters. Your tissues remember injuries. Your metabolism remembers abundance and shortage. You may notice how your body reacts faster to familiar challenges than to new ones. How a healed wound leaves behind tougher tissue. How certain stresses trigger immediate responses without conscious thought. This is cellular memory at work. Some memories fade quickly. Others persist for years. A few, under certain conditions, can influence how instructions are passed forward to future generations. This does not mean specific experiences are transmitted. Rather, the tendency to respond in certain ways can be carried along. This idea can feel unsettling at first. The notion that traces of the past move forward invisibly. But as you sit with it, the feeling softens. This memory is not burden. It is preparation. It is life learning how to continue. You sense how this reframes the idea of inheritance. What you receive is not just static instructions, but a history of responses. Your body arrives already leaning in certain directions, already primed by what came before. This does not lock you into a fate. Memory without a mind is flexible. It adjusts when conditions change. New patterns can form. Old ones can soften. The system remains open, even as it remembers. You may feel how this applies to healing. Recovery is not just about returning to a previous state. It involves rewriting tendencies, slowly teaching cells that conditions have changed. Safety replaces alarm. Repair replaces defense. This takes time. Cellular memory does not rush. It updates through repetition, through consistency. One calm moment does not erase long-held readiness. But many calm moments can gradually reshape response. As you rest, your body begins this quiet work. Signals of safety arrive. Muscles relax. Hormones shift. Cells register the change. No announcement is made, but memory is gently nudged in a new direction. You realize that much of who you are exists below awareness. Preferences, sensitivities, strengths. They are not chosen, yet they are not fixed. They are shaped by layers of remembering and responding. This understanding invites compassion. Toward yourself. Toward others. Bodies behave the way they have learned to behave. Reactions often precede reflection. Change requires patience, not force. The code does not judge its memories. It does not label them good or bad. It simply integrates them, adjusting its future responses accordingly. Perhaps this neutrality is what allows life to persist without bitterness. You may notice how this mirrors learning in your own life. Repetition shapes skill. Practice leaves traces. Mastery emerges not from thought alone, but from changes in structure, in timing, in ease of response. The boundary between mind and body blurs. Memory flows across it, taking different forms at different levels. Conscious recollection is only one expression of a much broader remembering. As sleep draws nearer, you feel held by this deeper intelligence. Your body knows more than you realize. It carries lessons you never studied, adaptations you never chose, wisdom gathered over time. Nothing about this memory demands attention. It works best when unnoticed, when allowed to operate quietly in the background, guiding without interrupting. As this chapter comes to rest, one gentle curiosity remains. If memory can exist without a mind, stored silently in the body's smallest structures, then perhaps understanding life also means learning how to listen to what has been remembered without words. And as that thought settles softly, the code continues to hold its quiet memories, preparing to be read again in the presence of new experience. You drift forward again, carried gently out of the deep interior of the cell and into a different kind of quiet space. Here, the air smells faintly of metal and clean surfaces. Lights glow softly. Machines hum with restrained purpose. This is a place where humans have learned to listen to the code without interrupting it. For a long time, the genetic language existed beyond reach. It shaped bodies faithfully, but remained unreadable. like a book sealed inside every cell. Then, slowly, with patience rather than force, methods emerged. Ways to open the book just enough to look, to observe without tearing pages, to understand without rewriting. Reading DNA does not involve shouting questions at it. It requires stillness. Samples are prepared carefully. Strands are separated, copied, and translated into signals machines can register. Patterns appear not as sentences, but as long strings of letters, quiet and exact. You sense the restraint in this work. Scientists do not rush to interfere. They read. They compare. They notice similarities and differences. They look for patterns that repeat across individuals and populations, patterns that hint at shared history and hidden relationships. From this reading, stories begin to emerge, though they are not told in words. Ancestry reveals itself through familiar sequences passed down through generations. Migration paths appear, traced not by maps, but by shared variations carried across continents and time. Health, too, leaves its imprint. Certain patterns correlate with increased risk or resilience. The code does not predict the future, but it suggests possibilities. Tendencies, not destinies. Clues, not commands. You feel how careful interpretation must be. The letters themselves are neutral. Meaning arises only when context is considered. A sequence that matters in one environment may be silent in another. A variation that once offered protection may become irrelevant or even challenging under different conditions. Reading the code requires humility. It reveals connections that challenge assumptions. Differences that seemed obvious at the surface dissolve at the molecular level. Humans, separated by culture and language, share the vast majority of their genetic text. Variation exists, but it is subtle compared to the overwhelming commonality. This realization can feel grounding. It reframes identity. You are unique yet deeply familiar, distinct yet composed of patterns repeated countless times across the species. The code confirms what experience often forgets. Separation is thinner than it appears. At the same time, knowledge brings responsibility. To read without changing is one thing. To understand without oversimplifying is another. The code does not speak morality. It does not tell you what should be done with what is learned. You may feel a quiet tension here. The ability to read the code invites curiosity, but also caution. Information can empower, but it can also burden. Knowing a tendency does not always ease uncertainty. Sometimes it deepens it. Scientists learn to hold this knowledge gently, to resist the urge to define people by sequences, to remember that genes interact with environments, experiences, and chance. The code contributes, but it does not act alone. Reading DNA is like listening to a very old piece of music played softly beneath everything else. You can hear themes, variations, echoes of earlier movements. But the music does not dictate how the listener should feel. Interpretation remains open. You notice how this mirrors the earlier lessons of memory and responsiveness. The code carries information, but meaning emerges through interaction, through context, through time. In laboratories, care is taken to protect the code from unnecessary exposure. Samples are stored. Privacy is respected, not because the code is fragile, but because understanding its power demands restraint. You sense how different this is from the way humans often treat knowledge. There is a temptation to rush toward conclusions, to seek certainty where only probability exists. The genetic language resists this. It remains subtle, layered, unwilling to offer simple answers. As you rest with this idea, it becomes clear that reading the code does not diminish mystery. It deepens it. The more patterns are revealed, the more complexity emerges. Understanding grows, but so does humility. The code remains unchanged by observation, continues copying, listening, remembering. It does not notice being read. It does not respond to curiosity, persists on its own terms. This independence feels reassuring. Life does not rely on being understood to continue. It does not pause while meaning is assigned. The code carries on, faithful to its quiet process. You may feel a sense of peace in this separation. Knowledge can inform, but it does not control. The deepest processes of life remain beyond intention, guided by principles older than thought. As sleep draws closer, the laboratory fades. The machines grow quiet. The strings of letters dissolve back into abstraction. One last question drifts gently with you. If the code can be read without being changed, if knowledge can exist without interference, then perhaps wisdom lies not in mastery, but in learning how to observe without grasping. And as that thought settles softly into the quiet of your mind, the code continues its calm work, unread and unbothered, waiting patiently within every living cell. You return once more to the smallest scale, carrying with you the quiet awareness that understanding has not replaced mystery. The code remains delicate, almost impossibly so. It is built from bonds that can be broken by heat, by radiation, by chemical noise drifting through the cell. And yet it endures. First, this feels like a contradiction. How can something so fragile persist across billions of years? How can threads so thin survive a world filled with disruption? The answer does not lie in strength, but in preparation. The genetic code does not assume safety. It expects disturbance. From the very beginning, it has existed in environments filled with danger. Radiation from the sun. Reactive molecules produced by metabolism. Errors introduced by copying itself. Damage is not an exception. It is a constant. So the system evolves not to avoid damage, but to respond to it. You imagine the code not as a rigid monument, but as a woven fabric. Individual threads may fray or snap, but the pattern holds because it is reinforced again and again. Repair mechanisms patrol the strands, scanning for breaks, mismatches, distortions. When damage is found, it is addressed quietly, efficiently, without alarm. Some repairs restore the original pattern perfectly. Others make small adjustments. A few fail entirely, but the presence of repair itself shifts the balance. Life does not need perfection at every moment. It needs enough stability, enough continuity to keep going. Redundancy plays a role here. Important instructions are often backed up. Multiple pathways exist to achieve the same outcome. If one route is blocked, another can compensate. This layering of safety does not make the system rigid. It makes it forgiving. You begin to see how endurance is distributed rather than concentrated. No single molecule carries the full burden of survival. Responsibility is shared across systems, across time, across countless repetitions. Failure is absorbed, not dramatized. This distributed resilience feels familiar. You may recognize it in your own life. Strength rarely comes from one decisive moment. It comes from many small adjustments, from habits that support recovery, from networks of support that prevent collapse when strain appears. The code does not panic when damage occurs. It does not interpret disruption as meaning. It responds with process. Identify, repair, replace, continue. There is no narrative attached to the breakage. Only response. Some damage escapes repair. When it accumulates beyond tolerance, a cell may stop dividing. It may even initiate its own quiet ending, removing itself for the sake of the larger system. This, too, is endurance, expressed not through persistence at all costs, but through balance. Life understands when to let go. You feel the calm wisdom in this. Survival is not stubbornness. It is adaptability guided by restraint. The code persists not by resisting change, but by accommodating it within limits. Over time, this strategy proves remarkably effective. Fragile molecules persist because they are expected to break. Enduring design emerges not from invincibility, but from repair, replacement, and redundancy woven together. You sense how this reframes the idea of resilience. It is not about never being harmed. It is about being able to respond to harm without losing coherence. It is about systems that assume vulnerability and plan accordingly. This perspective softens the fear of fragility. Delicacy is not weakness here. It is a condition that invites care, attention, and process. The code survives because it is treated gently by the systems surrounding it. As you rest, your own body mirrors this approach. Cells repair DNA damaged during the day. Proteins are recycled. Structures are renewed. Nothing dramatic announces this work. It happens best when you are still. Sleep supports endurance not by adding strength, but by allowing repair. The body expects wear. It schedules restoration accordingly. You begin to feel how deeply aligned this is with rest itself. Rest is not inactivity. It is preparation. It is the quiet phase where resilience is maintained. The code does not strive for permanence. It accepts transience at every level, from molecules to organisms. Endurance emerges from acceptance, not denial of change. You may notice how comforting this is. You do not need to be unbreakable. You need systems that help you recover. You need time. You need gentleness applied repeatedly. As this chapter draws toward stillness, the idea settles gently. Fragile threads can support enduring designs when care is built into the pattern. And as that thought drifts forward with you, another reflection begins to form. If your body is sustained by quiet repair and continuous rewriting, then perhaps you are not a finished structure at all, but a living manuscript, still being carefully revised. You slowly return your attention to yourself, not as a single outline resting in the dark, but as a layered presence composed of countless small processes continuing without pause. The code you have followed outward and backward now feels close again, intimate, no longer abstract. It lives inside you, quietly active, shaping this moment as gently as it shaped the first. You sense your body not as an object, but as a manuscript. Not a book already completed and shelved, but one still being written, edited, and revised line by line. The letters are ancient, but their arrangement is always current. Each breath you take supports another reading, another interpretation of the same enduring text. This manuscript does not record events the way memory does. It does not describe what happened yesterday or anticipate tomorrow. Instead, it holds instructions for how to continue, how to maintain coherence amid change. It is written in processes rather than sentences, in rhythms rather than paragraphs. You may feel how different this is from the way you usually think about yourself. It is tempting to imagine identity as fixed, as something you either possess or lack. But here, identity feels fluid, continuously reinforced through repetition rather than declaration. You are yourself because your cells keep doing what they have learned to do. Every moment, the code is being read. Proteins are built and folded. Structures are repaired. Signals are sent and received. Some instructions are emphasized. Others remain quiet. This selection shifts subtly with mood, environment, and time. Nothing about this process feels rushed. The code has learned patience through survival. It knows that endurance comes from consistency rather than urgency. Changes are introduced carefully, layered onto what already works. You may notice how this perspective eases the pressure to be complete. You are not meant to be finished. Completion would mean stillness without renewal. Life, by contrast, is defined by ongoing revision. Mistakes are not erasures here. They are part of the draft. Some are corrected. Others are incorporated. Very few are final. The manuscript evolves through use, not through perfection. This understanding invites gentleness toward yourself. Just as the code does not demand flawlessness, you do not need to demand it either. Stability emerges from process, not from control. Your body knows how to keep going even when conditions are imperfect. It has done so countless times before. It does so now, quietly adjusting, compensating, repairing. You may feel gratitude arise without effort. Gratitude for the systems that support you without asking for attention. For the letters that continue to pair correctly most of the time. For the repairs that happen while you sleep. The manuscript is collaborative. It is written by molecules, shaped by environment, influenced by experience. You are not the sole author, but you are not absent either. Your choices influence signals. Your habits influence patterns of response. Participation occurs without dominance. You breathe and oxygen enters, altering chemistry, supporting energy production. You rest and stress hormones recede, allowing maintenance to take priority. These simple actions become annotations in the living text. Nothing is wasted. Even damage informs future repair. Even stress teaches responsiveness. The code integrates experience without judgment. This manuscript also connects you to others. Though each body writes its own version, the language remains shared. Your story differs in arrangement, not in alphabet. This shared foundation allows empathy at a level deeper than thought. You may feel how comforting this is. You are not alone in learning how to be alive. Every organism participates in the same ongoing experiment, guided by the same principles. The manuscript does not seek meaning. Meaning arises only when minds reflect on it. The code itself is content with continuation. It does not ask why. It simply proceeds. And yet, from this simplicity, awareness emerges. Thought emerges. Curiosity emerges. The ability to lie quietly and listen to a calm voice explaining the process emerges. You sense how remarkable this is without needing to elevate it. No special purpose is required for wonder to exist. Complexity alone, sustained gently, is enough. As you rest, the idea of authorship softens. You do not need to control every line of the text. Much of it is written beyond awareness, guided by principles older than intention. Letting go of control does not mean disengagement. It means trust. Trust that the system knows how to maintain itself. Trust that revision is continuous. Your body continues reading itself into being, moment by moment. You continue to exist because this reading does not stop. As sleep draws closer, the manuscript grows quieter, not because it pauses, but because it shifts into a mode of maintenance and repair. Chapters are not closed. They are refined. One final thought settles gently before the transition. If you are both the text and the one becoming aware of it, then perhaps rest is the moment when the reader steps back, allowing the letters to continue arranging themselves in silence. And as that silence deepens, the manuscript remains open, waiting patiently, ready to be read again in the quiet unfolding of what comes next. You arrive at the quietest place in this journey, not because anything has ended, but because nothing needs to be explained anymore. The questions that once felt curious now feel soft, as though they are content to rest unanswered. What remains is simplicity. For letters, repeating, rearranging, continuing. The code does not seek conclusions. It does not aim toward an ending. It exists in a state of ongoing motion, like water flowing without destination. Each moment it reads, responds, repairs, and moves forward. When one arrangement reaches its limit, another begins. No pause, no ceremony. You feel how different this is from the way minds often move. The mind looks for meaning, for resolution, for a final sentence that ties everything together. The code does not share this urgency. It does not wonder what it all amounts to. It simply continues, and in that continuation, life persists. The four letters do not know they are remarkable. They do not compete or compare. They bond and release, pair and separate, responding only to physical laws that guide their interactions. From this simplicity, everything else emerges. You may sense how calming this is. No ambition drives the process. No anxiety shadows it. The code does not worry about legacy. It does not fear disappearance. It is content with movement itself. Even extinction, when it occurs, is not experienced as loss by the code. Some sequences stop being copied. Others continue elsewhere. The language itself remains intact, ready to be read again in new forms, new bodies, new arrangements. This indifference is not cold. It is peaceful. It allows life to unfold without attachment to outcome. Persistence does not require awareness of success. You feel how deeply this contrasts with human experience, where meaning is often tied to effort and outcome. Yet here, meaning seems to arise naturally without being pursued. Awareness emerges from complexity, not intention. You may notice how this reframes rest. Rest is not an interruption of purpose. It is part of the process. When you sleep, the code does not stop. It shifts. Maintenance replaces expression. Repair replaces response. Silence replaces signal. Your mind may drift now, no longer following each idea closely. That is fine. The story does not need to be held tightly. The code has never required attention to function. As your awareness softens, your body continues its quiet work. Cells read instructions suited for night. Repair pathways open. Energy is conserved. Balance is restored. The manuscript you carry is gently revised without commentary. You are not needed for this. You are allowed to let go. This is perhaps the deepest comfort of all. Life does not depend on vigilance. It does not require constant supervision. It has learned how to persist through rest. You may feel yourself becoming lighter, as if the responsibility to understand has been set down. Curiosity fades into acceptance. The need for explanation dissolves into presence. For letters, endless silence between them. This silence is not emptiness. It is space. Space for rearrangement. Space for continuation. The code has existed in silence for billions of years, long before voices arose to describe it. It will likely continue long after individual voices fade. This does not diminish the present moment. It grounds it. You exist now because the silence has been generous enough to allow complexity to emerge within it. As sleep deepens, the distinction between you and the process blurs further. You are not observing life anymore. You are participating in it through rest. Your breath slows. Muscles release. Thought loosens its grip. The code notices the change and responds accordingly, without awareness, without intention. There is no final lesson here. No summary that captures everything. The simplicity resists compression. Perhaps that is the point. Life does not need to be understood completely to be lived gently. The four letters do not demand reverence. They do not ask to be named. They continue whether or not they are noticed. You feel how this takes pressure off existence. You are allowed to be temporary. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to rest. The code will continue arranging itself through you for as long as it can. When it cannot, it will continue elsewhere. This is not loss. It is continuity expressed differently. As the last thoughts dissolve, one final awareness remains. Even as your mind drifts into sleep, even as consciousness loosens and fades, the quiet writing continues. And in that ongoing silence, without effort or intention, you are still being written.